Clark, step back three. Oh, she hit it and draws the foul. Welcome back, Caitlin Clark.
I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time.
If you're a college player and you're a great college player, like Caitlin was, the delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying the disrespect that they've shown to the WNBA. There's a huge target on this kid's back. Okay, this kid's coming into the league. And Diana said it best. This kid's in for a rude awakening.
Like Geno Auriemma could be the reason why Caitlin Clark is definitely not joining the Unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league.
Revenge is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it shows up calm, calculated, and deadly quiet. For Caitlin Clark, payback was never about clapping back online or throwing shade in front of cameras. She played it colder than that. One choice did all the talking. She declined the call. She turned down Geno Auriemma. She walked away from UConn's history, its reputation, and a 7-figure offer that suddenly appeared after years of silence. Legendary UConn women's basketball coach Geno Auriemma is an investor in Unrivaled, the new 3-on-3 women's basketball league founded by former UConn Huskies standouts Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart. The UCONN Mafia flexing its influence once again in the world of women's basketball. To most people, it made no sense. 8 weeks of basketball for more than $1 million sounds like a no-brainer. That kind of deal usually gets signed before the ink dries. But this offer was never just about money. It was a rescue rope for someone who once overlooked her, minimized her, and treated her like she was never that important.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like 3rd or 4th in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
By saying no, Clark did not just reject a contract. She stripped away his leverage. That is why this moment matters beyond the court. This is not a highlight reel story. It is about control and who holds it. For decades, Geno Auriemma sat at the center of women's basketball, deciding which players mattered and which ones faded out. His program shaped careers, and his approval was seen as everything. Caitlin Clark proved it was not. She built her own momentum without his system, without his voice, and without his resources. When he finally reached out, the roles had flipped. The power had already changed hands. Her response said enough without saying anything at all. She did not need the connection anymore. Every revenge story traces back to a single mistake. Geno's mistake was not tactical, it was personal. He underestimated her.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
Long before sold-out crowds and record ratings, Clark was simply a young player chasing an opportunity. She even said it herself. UConn felt like the dream destination, the dynasty, the place where legends were made, the highest level of the game. For a young player growing up in Iowa, it did not get bigger than UConn. That was the dream. When recruiting season arrived, everything seemed lined up perfectly. The most electric talent of her era linking up with the most powerful recruiter the sport had ever seen. On paper, it felt inevitable, but reality hit different. The phone never rang. Geno did not call.
I wanted UConn to recruit me. I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time. Geno never called me.
He did not reach out to Clark. He did not contact her parents. He barely passed along interest through an AAU coach. For someone known as the ultimate talent spotter, the silence said everything. That silence was not accidental. It was deliberate, and it sent a message that could not be ignored. She was not a priority. The excuse came later. UConn already had Paige Buchers locked in, and Geno claimed he did not want 2-point guards. That explanation might have sounded reasonable at first. Then came the part that crossed the line. Geno suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Let that sink in. A coach whose reputation was built on chasing generational talent decided she was not worth a phone call. Then he turned around and blamed a teenager for not pursuing him harder. That was not just a recruiting miss. That was a clear sign of disrespect, the kind that stays with you. Clark did not make noise about it. She did not complain or campaign for attention. She simply remembered it. If Geno did not believe in her, she would find a place that did. That decision led her to Iowa. No dynasty banners, no automatic spotlight, no borrowed prestige. To outsiders, it looked like settling. To Clark, it was freedom.
Who would have thought that all those years ago, back in Des Moines, Iowa, that this would be the case right now? And obviously we can see that it's done pretty darn well, and people are excited to see her play at every level.
At Iowa, she was not Paige's backup plan or Geno's forgotten option. She was the centerpiece. The program was hers to carry. From the moment she stepped on the court in Iowa City, everything shifted. Those deep logo shots were not just highlights. They were statements. Packed arenas were not hype. They were confirmation. Record-breaking TV numbers were not luck. They were proof. Every bucket she made added pressure. Every viral clip, every record shattered sent the same quiet message. You let this slip. While the numbers piled up, Geno chose not to reflect. He doubled down. Instead of respect, he leaned into dismissive comments. He brushed her off with smug remarks, calling her a kid, saying she played like she was just messing around in a driveway. Rather than recognize a once-in-a-generation force, he tried to shrink her game into something casual and small. But small does not fill Madison Square Garden. Small does not pull women's basketball into the mainstream. Small does not rewrite media deals or shift the culture. And that is where the irony hits hardest. Geno shut the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He assumed she would blend in, become another solid name that faded with time. Instead, she built the biggest brand the women's game has ever seen, and she did it without him. When he finally came back around with a contract in his hand, Clark did not lash out. She did not celebrate. She did not explain herself. She said no. That single word cut deeper than any postseason loss.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
It cost him relevance, control, and the illusion that he still dictated the future of the sport. Still, Geno could not let go. Anytime Clark's name surfaced, he found a way to tie her back to Paige Bueckers. If Clark played fearless, Paige did too. If Clark connected with fans, Paige had already done it. This was not coincidence. It was positioning. By attaching Clark's rise to players from his system, Geno kept himself part of the conversation. But people caught on, fans noticed, analysts noticed, coaches noticed, the act became obvious. Clark did not need comparisons or disclaimers. She was pulling crowds bigger than most pro teams. She was breaking records no one touched before. She was changing how people talked about women's basketball. And there was Geno, smiling for cameras, quietly gripping a throne that was already slipping away. Under the polished image sat insecurity, the kind that creeps in when attention starts drifting and there is no way to pull it back. Over time, the subtle jabs stopped being enough. Geno shifted from quietly minimizing Clark to openly targeting the people who stood behind her. For months, his approach had been criticism dressed up as analysis. Then came June of 2024. During an appearance on the Dan Patrick Show, he went too far. The Hall of Fame coach, a figure meant to represent the highest standard of women's basketball, did more than question Caitlin Clark's impact. He aimed his frustration at her supporters.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP at the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
There was no nuance in what he said. He labeled her fans as delusional. He claimed they did not understand the game. Then he took it further, suggesting their excitement was actually hurting women's basketball. All because they believed Clark could finish near the top of MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno, that belief was not enthusiasm or hope. He framed it as ignorance. Pause on that for a moment. Women's basketball was experiencing a surge it had never seen before. New viewers were tuning in. Families were showing up in jerseys. Young fans were lining up just to catch a glimpse of Clark. WNBA broadcasts were pulling in casual viewers who had never watched before, and Geno's reaction was not appreciation. It was not excitement, it was dismissal. Instead of embracing the momentum, he pushed against it. This was not a coach offering thoughtful critique or balanced perspective. It was personal. A direct shot at the foundation of Clark's rise. The very fans who helped bring women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight became his target. And once that line was crossed, there was no walking it back. Geno was not only brushing off Caitlin Clark, he was brushing off the people who powered her rise. And because of who he was, his words landed harder. When he labeled her supporters as clueless, it revealed more than frustration. It showed how deeply he was underestimating her. By dismissing the fans, he was dismissing the movement itself. The message behind his comments was clear. The buzz was fake. The attention would fade. Eventually, reality would catch up and prove him right. That was the bet he made, and it backfired in the worst way. Clark did not rush to social media. She did not fire off quotes or cancel interviews. She did not have to respond at all. Her answer came where reputations are actually decided, on the court. What happened next was not just validation. It was a full collapse of Geno's credibility. Caitlin Clark captured Rookie of the Year. Then she pushed even further, earning all WNBA first-team honors. When the MVP voting wrapped up, she landed exactly where her so-called delusional fans said she would. Fourth, right on the mark. The prediction he mocked turned into fact. And with it, his authority took a hit. This was bigger than one player winning awards. It was a moment of redemption for the fans he laughed at. Every parent who brought their child to a game, every casual viewer who tuned in for the first time, every new supporter who believed the hype. Geno framed them as a problem. Clark proved they saw the future more clearly than he did. And the coldest part of it all was how she handled it. No speeches, no back and forth, no drama, just outcomes. Night after night, she delivered. Deep logo shots, clean crossovers that left defenders stuck, sharp passes that cracked defenses open, performances that spoke louder than any comment ever could. By the time the awards rolled in, the conversation was finished. She had answered every doubt without ever mentioning his name. There was something fitting about that. Geno had long cast himself as the ultimate authority on women's basketball. The seasoned voice who believed he understood the game better than the fans, the media, and anyone watching from the outside. But the results told a different story. The fans were right. Clark was right. Geno was wrong. Every sold-out arena, every record broken, every honor collected chipped away at the idea that he was still the one who decided what mattered. She did not need his approval then, and she never had. The irony is that Clark was not out to prove anything to him. She was not chasing validation or trying to win a personal feud. He was not the focus at all. She was simply doing what she always did, playing her game at the highest level. And that alone was enough to expose how outdated his stance had become. Enough to show the world that the narrative had shifted. By the end of her rookie season, the conversation was no longer about hype. It was about how thoroughly she erased doubt. Geno's remarks aged badly. What once sounded confident now read like some of the worst takes the sport had seen. Defensive, bitter, completely off the mark. And being wrong was something he struggled to accept. At that point, it stopped being just about Clark's performance. It became about what she symbolized, a change in power, a new era taking over. Women's basketball no longer revolved around him, and instead of acknowledging that reality, he fell back on habit. He kept talking. More interviews, more podcasts, more attempts to hold onto a spotlight that was no longer his. Her name was never far from his mouth, and every time it came up, the same routine followed. A bit of praise, a subtle jab, a compliment padded with a warning label. The more he talked, the clearer it became. Caitlin Clark was not just breaking records, she was stuck in Geno Auriemma's head. Eventually, words stopped working. For months, Geno tried to steer the conversation with comparisons and side comments. He framed Clark's rise as something familiar, something borrowed, something tied back to his dynasty. He took shots at her fans, brushed off her impact, and tried to keep himself centered in the story. But Clark kept winning. She kept shining, and his grip on the narrative kept slipping. So he changed tactics. If influence could not be maintained through commentary, maybe it could be bought. That is where the money entered the picture. By that point, Geno had already run through every option. He ignored her during recruiting. He downplayed her breakout. He dismissed the people who followed her. He tried to package her stardom as a recycled version of what he had already built. None of it slowed her momentum. Clark kept rising while his relevance continued to fade. Then a new opportunity emerged, dressed up as innovation. A 3-on-3 women's league, backed by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno heavily involved behind the scenes. The concept had ambition. It had serious financial backing. What it lacked was identity. It needed a face. And that was when the situation became clear. For all the respected names attached to the project, only one player could give it instant credibility. Only one athlete could bring millions of fans, media attention, and sponsor interest overnight. Only one star had the pull to position the league as a true rival to the WNBA. That star was Caitlin Clark.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
And so Geno made the move no one expected. He reached out. Reports later confirmed the offer. Over $1 million for an 8-week season. It was one of the largest offers ever placed in front of a women's basketball player. Let that settle for a moment. The same coach who once could not be bothered to make a recruiting call was now putting 7 figures on the table, hoping she would rescue his latest project. The same voice that questioned whether her popularity was real was suddenly trying to cash in on it. The contradiction could not have been clearer. The coach who mocked her fan base now depended on that same crowd to tune in, buy tickets, and legitimize his league. The people he dismissed were suddenly essential. That irony cut deep. This was never just about business. It was personal. If Geno landed Clark, he could reshape the narrative. He could argue that her rise was still connected to his influence. He could frame her success as another branch of the empire he built instead of proof that it was no longer needed. He could reassert control. But Clark saw through it immediately. When the offer landed in front of her, she did not see opportunity. She saw a test, a last attempt to reclaim power from someone who had spent years minimizing her. Her response came fast and clean. No explanations, no counteroffers, no hesitation. One word, no. It carried more weight than every interview he had given combined. She did not need his money. She did not need his platform. She did not need his validation. The man who once overlooked her was now asking for help, and she declined with quiet precision. That moment sealed it. The rejection was total. Geno Auriemma, long known as a gatekeeper of the sport, had been reduced to offering a fortune to the very player he once dismissed. And she turned it down without spectacle, without bitterness, without drama, just refusal. The aftermath was unforgiving. Without Clark, the Unrivaled League lost its center of gravity. Its appeal weakened overnight. What was meant to look bold and powerful instead revealed desperation. The massive offer stopped looking like confidence and started looking like need. The project needed her far more than she ever needed it. Fans understood exactly what they were seeing. Online reactions poured in, mocking the idea that Clark would save a system that had never respected her. The grand strategy Geno believed he was executing collapsed in a single move. Clark did not rant. She did not embarrass him publicly. She did not even acknowledge him beyond her decision. She walked away, and that silence landed harder than any response ever could, because the truth was unavoidable. Geno's era had passed. His grip on the sport was gone, and Clark did not just challenge it. She rendered it obsolete. For decades, figures like him controlled the routes to success. They shaped the narratives, they decided who mattered, and who waited their turn. Clark broke that structure. She did not need banners or borrowed prestige. She did not need approval from the old guard. She built something independent, and by rejecting the $1 million offer, she sent a message that echoed beyond one contract. The future belongs to the players, not the gatekeepers. That is why this moment stings so much. Geno's greatest mistake was not overlooking her early. It was believing the sport could not thrive without him. He assumed he was essential. She proved otherwise. And that lesson did not stop with him. It served as a warning to every coach, executive, and power broker still clinging to control. Clark's rejection was not just personal, it marked a shift, a clear dividing line between the old structure and what comes next. She showed a generation of athletes they do not need permission to lead. All it took was one quiet decision, one refusal, one no. In the end, this was never just a feud between a coach and a player, it was a warning shot, a reminder that power in women's basketball has shifted for good. The old model relied on gatekeepers, permission, and approval from the top. Caitlin Clark proved none of that is required anymore. She did not ask to be crowned. She did not demand control. She earned it through fans, through numbers, through undeniable impact. One quiet decision exposed an entire system that thought it would last forever. And stories like this are happening more often than people realize, behind the scenes, off the court, away from press conferences and headlines. That is why Courtside Leaks exists. To pull back the curtain, to connect the dots the league does not want connected. If you want the real stories shaping basketball's future, stay locked in. Because the next power shift is already happening. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.